Freedom, a significant political symbol and expression that evokes innumerable emotions and possesses diverse connotations. Countries worldwide have specific definitions and narratives regarding liberty and how it shaped and defined its citizens. The record is often nuanced when discussing freedom from the American historical standpoint and challenges people's beliefs, realities, and familial histories. Moreover, the parallels between the expression of freedom and critical events in American history are uncanny. Between the official year of America's founding in 1776 with the Declaration of Independence through the year 2020 rests 244 years. Acknowledging that there were much earlier accounts of Africans enslaved in America, using Jamestown as a recognizable standing point dictates that the time between 1619 to the official declaration of the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863 by America's 16th President Abraham Lincoln equally reflects 244 years. 2 years removed from 1863, African Americans in Galveston, Texas, learned of their declared freedom in 1865, marking the famous and unofficial celebration of Juneteenth. Connectively, 2 years from 2020, Juneteenth is officially considered a federal holiday in America. Freedom, a word and a concept consisting of 7 letters that one could say represent the now almost 7 generations removed from abolishing slavery. Freedom and the expression of freedom remain a highly contested, protected, and celebrated concept for African Americans, especially those native to the South. Since being signed into law as a federal holiday, many people around the United States have continued to designate and inaugurate Juneteenth freedom traditions and various celebrations in honor of the monumental observation first experienced by African American Galvestonians and other Black people of the diaspora. However, the road to commemorating freedoms in America was just as winding and challenging as the manufactured societal struggles set before Black and other ethnic minorities in pre- and post-Civil War and the Reconstruction era. When considering the history of commemorating freedom in the African American community, several historic events collectively represent steps toward what transpired constitutionally and socially regarding legacy and tradition in America. The celebratory history behind commemorating freedom yields differing dates based on when local emancipation laws took effect or when people from different corners of the states heard about the Emancipation Proclamation. Later, challenges and triumphs primarily centered on political movements would also take the stage in the journey toward freedom commemoration. Before holidays honoring African American freedom in America existed, a series of legal amendments and events in history catalyzed how the holiday originated and commenced. Prior to the Emancipation Proclamation, signed on January 1, 1873, an earlier draft was destroyed in the Chicago Fire of 1871. Nevertheless, fate toward freedom included war, which stood to support the signing accounts for the decision to free enslaved people of the South as a measure to aid the Union soldiers in defeating the Confederacy in 1862. The Emancipation Proclamation is considered the most powerful instrument of slavery's destruction, defining the Civil War as a war for Black freedom. Still, its signing and implementation did not free enslaved people in the South. An earlier distinction from the proclamation was Emancipation Day, a day that coincides with the federal holiday, New Year's Day. By December 1865, the 13th Amendment would be ratified, outlawing slavery and involuntary servitude throughout the country. In anticipation of this status, on New Year's Eve, 1862, many Northern African Americans gathered in churches to hold vigils while awaiting the dawn of what they hoped and prayed would be a new day in America. Known as Watch Night services. To this day, many African Americans attend such freedom celebration services on December 31st. In contrast, such Southern acknowledgments of Emancipation Day at this time were restricted to areas under Union control. Most states did not accept laws or proclamations from their northern neighbors. Preceding amendments known as the 14th Amendment in 1868, which defined all persons born in the United States as citizens, and the 15th Amendment of 1870, which prevented the denial of voting based on race, color, and previous definitions of servitude, rounded out what was considered the Reconstruction Amendments in American history. The amendments are viewed as the added support toward challenging oppositions with true freedom for African Americans that initially dedicated focus and attention to civil rights. Other acts forgotten with the Reconstruction era, such as the Freedmen's Bureau Act and the Civil Rights Act of 1866, marked further seminal battles toward commemorating freedoms and civil liberties for decades to come. The seeds for National Freedom Day were planted before the rallying call for National Freedom Commemoration known as Juneteenth in honor of African Americans. Richard Robert Wright, formerly an enslaved child at the 13th Amendment signing, led the charge. Wright later became a highly accomplished college founder and banker. He expressed the importance of creating National Freedom Day on February 1st to honor President Lincoln signing the proclamation on February 1st, 1865. To Wright, February 1st reflected the actual freedom commemoration of the freedom measure that freed enslaved Americans. Like many trailblazers, he would not be physically granted the opportunity to witness the change. 1 year after his passing, on June 30th, 1948, the U.S. Congress and the 33rd U.S. President, President Truman, passed a bill to make February 1st National Freedom Day. This measure was considered the first official public holiday recognition for African Americans. President Truman asked Americans to pause to commemorate the official recognition of African American freedom in America with its signing. Nonetheless, this gain towards national designation with a holiday symbolizing freedom for African Americans was barely publicized due to political concerns for President Truman during the election year of 1948. Official recognition of National Freedom Day on February 1st would not occur until half a century later, on August 12, 1998, by the U.S. Congress. History also writes that National Freedom Day led to the creation of Black History Week, later coined and transformed into Black History Month, which nationally designates an annual celebration for African American accomplishments and freedoms in February, another staple tradition. The popular Juneteenth celebration, sometimes referred to as America's Second Independence Day, holds its distinction in African American history as the oldest nationally celebrated freedom commemoration, acknowledging the ending of slavery. On June 19, 1865, Union Major General Gordon Granger officially declared the freedom of enslaved people after arriving in Galveston, Texas, to command the District of Texas following the Civil War. Compared to other significant historical moments, General Granger's emancipation delivery was taken on the embodiment of cultural folktales, a phenomenon that historically exists within African American culture, language, and expression. 3 commonly discussed tales consider the announcement of freedom in different concepts. One suggests that the landowners in Texas were adamant about retaining the 1865 harvest, delaying the announcement of emancipation. A second instance believed that a previous messenger was murdered en route to Texas. The third shared folktale of Juneteenth excludes General Granger altogether. Instead, it places an anonymous male who partook in a mule ride journey across the United States from Washington to Texas, causing the announcement delay until June 1865. As aforementioned, the observance of Juneteenth was challenged by political controversies and varying opinions from both local and national political leaders within and outside the African American community. One political pushback suggested the notion that African Americans would be negatively represented based on public food and dance traditions, leading to continued entrenched stereotypes if such national distinctions were ever established. Notably, in 1979, lawmakers in Texas made Juneteenth a state holiday. Despite the state recognition win, the bill failed to pass overwhelmingly because many people supported Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday being considered the state holiday, commemorating freedom gained by African Americans. During the 20th century, other oppositions against Juneteenth and its traditions were from advocates and African Americans determined to seek civil liberties and financial freedoms during the Great Migration. Due to World War II, the natural decline of Juneteenth celebrations in the late 1930s and mid-40s caused commemoration traditions to wane. But despite these influences, Juneteenth celebrations and recognitions persevered like the culture of people it represents and symbolizes. Hidden within the Great Migration were the celebrations around the country, especially in the South. These spread because of people migrating from Texas to neighboring states such as Louisiana, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and as far west as California. They brought with them traditions, expressions, and the history of Juneteenth. Arkansas, a state considered an early adopter of Juneteenth celebrations, held unique freedom commemoration traditions. In Juneteenth's earliest celebration, Arkansans were thought to have experienced Juneteenth for themselves in a way that they hadn't previously imagined. After the war, freed people who returned to Arkansas celebrated the occasion before archival records were probably accounted for. Since 2005, Arkansas has recognized the third Saturday in June as a day to celebrate the end of slavery, acknowledge the history of slavery in the state, and provide a form of healing and reconciliation. Places such as Pocahontas, for example, have been celebrating Juneteenth as a community since 2008. From education events to cultural celebrations, Juneteenth traditions has spread throughout the South and the Arkansas Delta, creating important commemorative events and actions towards commemorating freedom. Plainly defined, Juneteenth is considered a celebratory holiday consisting of various meanings, forms of celebration, and cultural traditions that have recently become more of a part of mainstream culture. Juneteenth in the South ushered in liberating forms of expression for African Americans, often preceded by geographical and political parameters designed to prevent and hinder festivities for Black people based on Jim Crow-era laws and sanctions. For decades, Southern Black communities were forced to celebrate Juneteenth on the outskirts of town due to Jim Crow racism. With this aspect in mind, some Juneteenth committees and groups in Texas often collectively purchase plots of land, commonly referred to as emancipation parks, in respective cities to celebrate, creating sole public parks for Black people. The common thread linking several Juneteenth traditions that emerged from Southern commemoration often bridge the past with the present. Popular Juneteenth and Emancipation Day celebrations included public ceremonies, such as parades and music festivals, inspiring the passion for expressing joy and triumph. Commemorative parades projected a vision of a society transformed and made whole. Through pride, organization, and stable social orders vividly depicted in commemorative parades, it celebrated a way forward by harnessing the past to a future vision. Central to African American culture, music festivals helped shape Juneteenth's remembrance. Musical genres reflected in Southern commemoration festivals included traditional folk songs, blues, and a genre that significantly influenced blues known as gospel. Gospel is considered a form of euphoric, rhythmic, religious music rooted in the spiritual tradition of the African American South. Blues and gospel music often reflect the past troubles and ails and allow Black people to celebrate freedoms won in the present. Blues, traditional folk songs, and gospel music serve as positive and influential forms of expression that encourage diverse audiences to attend as years progress past the civil rights movement and into the late 20th century and early 21st century. Various symbols are synonymous with Juneteenth culture and center on food offerings. Elaborate commemorative festivals celebrations usually support picnics and family reunion-style meals. These meals consist of barbecue paired with typical barbecue staples like potato salad, seasoned fried chicken, hot dogs, watermelon, and old-fashioned tea cakes made using recipes handed down through generations. Regarding beverages, jugs of lemonade, illicit spirits, and the ever-popular red soda and red velvet cake are considered a Juneteenth tradition symbolic of the struggles and lives lost on the road to freedom and recognition of the American flag. Personally, freedoms are still commemorated with familial bonds through the scope of reunion, which readily acknowledges the ancestors, their accomplishments, trials, and most importantly, their contribution toward the journey of freedom. The Juneteenth flag is also designed in this fashion to represent the newfound freedom that designated the freed people as legitimized American citizens. The 5-point star represents the state of Texas as the Lone Star State. Prayer services and numerous educational activities, like readings of the General Order reenactment of General Granger's arrival, are also considered ritualistic activities at historical holiday and festival gatherings, seeking to bring the past alive in the present and educate others. General Granger's arrival reenactments, initially native to Texas, have also been known to be conducted in Louisiana, mostly because history also accounts that Granger left New Orleans, Louisiana, to begin his historic journey. Educational traditions, including a popular song known as Lift Every Voice and Sing, written by American composers and brothers James Weldon Johnson and J. Rosamond Johnson, coined as the Black National Anthem, can also be experienced in every Juneteenth gathering. Some commemorative festivals also include events honoring fathers due to Juneteenth being held near and sometimes on Father's Day in June. Overall, the commemoration of freedoms for African Americans does not just honor the past. Public processions of Southern Black freedom commemoration insisted that the advent of Black liberty forever changed African Americans, the South, and the nation. As African Americans continued to search through the diverseness of their cultural identity, the commemoration of Juneteenth is just one of the reasons that the celebration's popularity has increased and remains relevant today. It is profoundly exciting to know that as of June 14, 2022, Juneteenth is officially recognized and observed in all 50 states and the District of Columbia. In addition, at least 18 states have enacted laws to observe the holiday as a paid state holiday. Over the past year, we've all witnessed the growing popularity of celebration. While the world continues to learn about the greatness and cultural reflection of Juneteenth, we need to be intentional about our Juneteenth celebrations and how we educate ourselves and others about Juneteenth and its relevance. Freedom commemorations serve various social, political, economic, and cultural functions by challenging the dominant Eurocentric interpretations of American history and culture. With this thought in mind, it is essential to focus our attention on getting the information out within our communities regarding the history of Juneteenth. We can do this by hosting events and encouraging local and chain businesses to support the avenue of education, rather than commodifying products geared toward Juneteenth entertainment. Other ways to provide meaningful and fulfilling Juneteenth commemoration include exploring selected readings and documentaries, volunteering and supporting local businesses that reinforce the importance of Black equity and financial equality. Regarding today's society, commemorating freedom through Juneteenth and other expressions should never be considered an outdated designation. As one of the official poems of Juneteenth, We Rose by Christina K. states, "Skills of art, life and beauty and family, crushed by forces we knew nothing of, we rose. Survive we must, we did. We rose to be you, we rose to be me. Above everything expected, we rose. To become the knowledge we never knew, we rose." How freedom is expressed and celebrated may differ as people continue fighting for equality in this country. Yet the passion, traditions, and most importantly, the recognition of commemorating freedoms will continue to expand beyond what was ever imagined or expected.